Greetings and welcome to this fourth segment on the topic of Christians and government in Part 1, Biblical Economics. In the last session, we saw from Scripture our individual responsibility for using our financial blessings to help the needy, and what the Bible sets forth as the ideal for the role of the government, particularly in Psalm 72, which is a picture of an ideal king, and states that the righteous king delivers the needy and afflicted when they have no helper. This indicates that the government ideally should help the needy and afflicted if no one else can. Therefore, a second resort, not the first resort. Let's now apply this in regard to methods for helping the poor and disabled in our modern time and culture. There are three ways we can go about this as indicated in this diagram. Number 1, giving personally and directly. Number 2, giving to charitable organizations such as the church, the Salvation Army, shelters for the homeless, and other such charities who in turn provide service and/or money to the needy and homeless. And third, giving by means of our taxes to the government, local, state, and federal, for agencies such as food stamp programs, the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, which helps people with disabilities find suitable employment, the Bureau of Services for the Visually Impaired, and then of course Medicaid. These government agencies in turn provide service and/or financial aid to the needy, and also to facilities that care for those who have developmental disabilities. Some of these facilities are also funded in part by charitable giving. The questions that arise from these methods are, number 1, which method is most effective? Number 2, which method is most efficient? And number 3, who benefits the most in each method? If you're viewing this video in a group, take a few minutes now to pause the video and discuss these questions. In regard to question 1, which method is most effective? Method 1, I think, should be the first resort and best resort if the needy one is family or friend. But for a stranger, you may not know what you're getting into. Therefore, one of the intermediary agencies would be best. In regard to questions 2 and 3, which method is most efficient and who benefits the most in each method, when a charity organization or the government becomes the middleman channel for distributing benefits and services to the poor and disabled, the government workers get paid to do it. The workers in charity organizations get paid too, but many of the workers are volunteers. So the workers, especially in the government, may actually benefit more than the poor people whom they are supposed to help, getting well over half the money that comes in, while the needy who are supposed to receive the benefit get less than half. This is a common question that comes up when giving to charity organizations. What percentage of my money actually goes to helping the ones who need it? In regard to this method of the church and other charity organizations helping the needy, several church denominations have established and operate many hospitals in our country. In fact, healthcare and hospitals were ministries that Christians started in the early centuries of Christianity. If churches can do that, then in our day, with all the various needs in addition to health care, why can or cannot the church do all the work of helping the needy and disabled? Can churches start and run operations that the government currently operates? I don't know the answer to that, but it might be possible if lower tax rates put more money into the hands of the citizens who could give to charities. As for comparing government agencies versus charity organizations, Jay Richards in his book Money, Greed, and God says that government programs don't help or have helped very little and are actually an interference, for one thing, taking money that could have been given directly as charity. What are your thoughts on this? In regard to our question of why can or cannot the church do all the work of helping the needy and disabled, consider, for example, wide areas of poverty like Appalachia, where few people are wealthy enough to give enough to help. So with these things in mind, take some time now to discuss the questions. Why can or cannot the church do all the work of helping the needy and disabled? Can churches start and run operations that the government currently operates, like the Governmental Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation? If you're viewing this video in a group, take a few minutes again now to pause the video and discuss these questions. In regard to whether or not the churches can do all the work of helping the needy, a Christian friend of mine who is a historian said that in the Great Depression of the 1930s, the government intervened because even though the churches were doing all they could, they were unable to do enough because so many people were so hard hit. This certainly does not mean that government can lift everyone out of poverty, because it obviously has not over all these years. So again, this goes back to the truth we find in Scripture, that the poor will always be with us. But as Scripture also says, we must do what we can to improve their condition. Here's another question to consider. Has government in some ways contributed to a mindset in society so that when a need arises, many people say, "That's the government's job, let them do it"? Here again, you might want to pause the video to discuss this question. Let's also look at this issue from another angle. In our day, what about underproductive people or even totally unproductive people? We need to understand that there are varying degrees of disabilities. Some are severe and immediately obvious on the one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum are those with certain kinds of disabilities that are not immediately obvious, but significant enough to hinder their ability to work. There are some uninformed observers looking at this kind of person and concluding from surface appearance, "You're just lazy. You just need to apply yourself and get your act together." They don't understand and don't know and are insensitive to the fact that such people have disabilities and need special help. Now, of course, there are some people who are just lazy, yet capable of doing productive work. There are some professionals who can discern and diagnose a true disability versus laziness, and who know how best to help the poor and truly disabled. Government agencies involve professionals in this role. Government programs like the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation and Bureau for the Visually Impaired are good and necessary. They are composed of professionals which may exist in some churches, but not every church. Yet the service of such government agencies is based on Judeo-Christian principles of help and compassion. There are also agencies and housing facilities that serve people who have developmental disabilities. I currently work for such an agency, a Christian agency that provides care for people with developmental disabilities. They are funded to a small extent by charitable donations, but largely by Medicaid, because the extent of care they need in many cases is just too burdensome for family members alone. Some charitable private agencies who help the poor and the homeless also have expertise to know the causes of their problems and how best to help them. As for comparing government agencies versus charity organizations, government programs can be good. This is called social legislation, which is made possible because of the wealth-producing nature of a capitalistic system. But there is a point where government programs can and have gone too far and become socialistic, communistic, and even tyrannical. So, no economic system is perfect. So I think we need the church, charity organizations, and the government, but a government that operates on Judeo-Christian values. And that's the conclusion of part 1. Thank you for listening. Next will be part 2 on religious values versus contemporary demands and government rulings.